Do we create our own reality? And if so, to what degree? Each individual on this planet must look deep into themselves and see the desires of their conscious and subconscious. For many do not realize the predicament that they reside in is in fact of their own making. Chris Watts is a man who murdered his family and is now incarcerated for the rest of his life. A question many undoubtedly want to know is why? Why would a young man with a family plus another child on the way murder his family? This question we may never know the answer to. However, we can look at what an individual says and assess whether it correlates in line with their subsequent actions. Before Chris Watts killed his family, he made a speech about communication, where he talks about relationships. Let's observe what he says and compare it to the actions he later took and how his life has unfolded since.
My name is Chris Watts. I'm doing my communication speech for Brenda Armentrout, and welcome to Broomfield, Colorado. It's about 70 degrees and it's awesome outside, so welcome.
Notice how Chris Watts is clasping his hands together. This is an indication that while he's saying what he's saying, he's also simultaneously holding information in that he doesn't want to reveal. Chris could very well have had desires and urges that he was either trying to suppress or hadn't had what he perceived as an opportunity to act upon, or the circumstances weren't yet at the point where he deemed it necessary to take action. This could have been on a conscious or subconscious level, or a bit of both. Either way, the clasping of hands is a stance of withholding information. It also creates a barrier between the person speaking and the person or people listening. It closes them off as opposed to a more open stance, such as having the arms by the wayside. It must also be noted that people could take this more defensive stance when they are nervous, as opposed to a more confident stance where more of the body is revealed.
I'm doing my speech on relationship deterioration and repair, and this is my PowerPoint to help me. Deterioration. The relationship begins to fall apart, crumble, or fail. You have weakening bonds. You get bored of the everyday routine, and you get distractions such as work, hobbies, relationships, no matter how harmless, even at the job. You might meet a new person, and it could strengthen into something else, and could weaken the bond you have with the partner you have.
Chris Watts literally talks about what he went on to do with Nicole Kessinger. He met Nicole Kessinger when they were at work, which subsequently turned into an affair.
You spend less time with each other, and sometimes you have no time to maintain the relationship. Sometimes in a relationship, you maybe make promises that can turn into a major betrayal, or minor arguments that could turn into things where you could say spiteful comments, which turn into bigger problems. The first phase of deterioration is interpersonal dissatisfaction, which when you become unhappy with all the everyday interactions with you and your partner. You also begin to view your future with your partner as a negative future. And the second phase is interpersonal deterioration.
Chris Watts clearly saw a future with Shanann Ruzick as a negative, which led him to taking the action that he took. He also stated to police that he told Shanann that he no longer wanted to be with her. It has to be considered that anything Chris says cannot be believed. However, if it is indeed true that he told Shanann that he no longer wanted to be with her, it would correlate with the speech that he gave 6 years prior.
Which you start to grow farther and farther apart. You share less of your free time with each other. You have more awkward silences at dinner, or when you're just out by yourself, you don't talk at all. You disclose less of your feelings, and you show less affection toward each other.
Chris had withdrawn from sexual interaction with Shanann. This is no doubt because he was having a new relationship with Nicole Kessinger. The pattern he spoke about here is the exact pattern he went on to follow.
When you have good communication, you show more nonverbal communication, which is the majority of the messages we send, like through gestures, facial expressions, eye contact, the tone of your voice. And there's many types of forms of communication these days, and it's the most successful groundwork for relationships.
One thing that is very apparent to me is Chris's inherent lack of confidence. He comes across as extremely shy, withdrawn, and introverted. To add to that, even in this video, which is a speech presentation, you can tell it doesn't come naturally to him. And to an extent, he is still withdrawn as he does not interact with the audience or include his audience at all, often avoiding eye contact. People like this sometimes, but not always, can lack the communication skills to vocalize their frustrations, which can then subsequently build and build until one day it comes out in a devastating rage.
A few quotes that I've done research on from Elaine Schoenberg. All relationships problems stem from poor communication skills, which is very true. And another quote from Schoenberg and Sorjan: you can't communicate while you're checking your BlackBerry, watching TV, or flipping through sports section, which is very true. With technology nowadays, you'll be on your iPhone, your BlackBerry, at a restaurant, and you'll see two people at a table, and you'll see both of them on their phones, either Facebook comment status, or maybe playing a game. And there's no communication at all.
Shanann was very frequent with her phone and was consistently on camera. Chris, being an introverted person, most likely did not want to be on camera all the time or be with someone who used their phone as frequently as Shanann. The best thing for him to do would have been to leave Shanann when he saw how open she was with sharing her life with people, whether she was like that when they first met or she became more like that when they were together. He could have spoken to her about it, and if he was still unhappy, he could have simply left her, as opposed to murdering her.
Commitment the degree of commitment affects your relationship. According to Hirofumi, not surprisingly, commitment is especially strong when individuals are satisfied with their relationship and grows weaker as individuals become less satisfied. You have to ask yourself 3 questions when you're in a relationship. Do I have a desire to keep this relationship going? Do I have a moral obligation to stay in this relationship? Or is it a necessity for me to stay in this relationship? According to my research, sometimes a necessity could be children. Sometimes when you have children and your relationship starts to deteriorate, a child could help repair it. All relationships are held together in part by a form of commitment, either based on desire, obligation, or necessity. And when the commitment is strong enough to hold the relationship together, you avoid arguing about minor disagreements and you support one another. When commitment is weak, the relationship is full of doubt and the relationship deteriorates faster. You have 2 types of deterioration. You have sudden and you have gradual. Sudden would be an example of infidelity. When somebody is not faithful to their partner, the partners realize that the relationship cannot be sustained. Gradual would be if you met somebody at work or a new friendship has occurred and as it goes on, you see that, okay, maybe this relationship has more potential than the relationship I have with my partner. And that would gradually push the old relationship out and push the new relationship in. Reasons relationships start to fall apart. Sometimes you no longer find your partner attractive, physically or in their personality. When you're in a relationship, you have to show desire, lust towards your partner. Sometimes when you get married, that the lust and the desire kind of falls by the wayside a little bit. But if you want your relationship to keep going, I would suggest maybe go to a place where you first met, or go bungee jumping, go somewhere that will bring the excitement back. You no longer experience closeness. Or when your differences become more important than similarities. You just pick apart your partner, and you don't see anything that you have in common anymore. You just see something he or she does, and it just gets on your nerves, and you just can't let that go. And you feel you might do better with someone else that you've met. You think that you can no longer that your partner is someone that you can't be with.
Again, this could have been what happened with Nicole Kessinger. Chris probably created his own reality with regards to meeting Nicole. Chris could very well have saw in Nicole what he wanted to see in Nicole to justify to himself the fact that he no longer wanted to be with Shanann, whereas in reality, Nicole may or may not have been the person Chris imagined her to be.
When you feel you are putting more into the relationship than you are getting out. According to Bloomstein and Schwartz, when a relationship breaks up, it's generally the more attractive one that leaves, which I agree with somewhat and then I disagree with. When in repair, the stage is not always pursued. Sometimes people, when the relationship starts to dissolve, repair is not an option and they want to get away and start new.
Chris told FBI agent Graham Coder that he wanted to split up with Shanann, and that although some couples stay together because of the children, he thought splitting up would be the best option for them.
When you want to go into repair, you need to analyze what went wrong and consider what ways of solving the problems. You need to consider changing your behavior or perhaps changing your expectations for your partner. And you might also want to evaluate how you could feel in the relationship if it had ended. One of the first stages of repair you need to recognize, identify the problem, what changes you need to make the relationship better. Avoid words like always and never. If you say this to your partner, it just makes the relationship makes it backtrack. You'll never get to the repair stage. You need to take responsibility for your feelings and not blame your partner. And you need to be descriptive when discussing grievances. Resolution and conflict resolution. You need to look closely for relational messages that will help clarify motivations and needs. Exchange perspectives and see the situation as your partner does. You need to own your own feelings and thoughts. Use active listening techniques. Listen to your partner. Make sure they feel wanted. Make sure that they know that you're there and not in space somewhere thinking about the baseball game that's coming up or the football game that's coming up, which I sometimes do. Think clearly before saying things you may later forget. Don't just blurt out something. Just think about it. Don't just, if it comes to your mind, then it might be wrong. I do that too. And keep channels of communication open. Always disclose your feelings. Don't keep things bottled up because it will later come back to bite you.
Assessing Chris's apparent lack of confidence and communication skills from footage, it's very possible, in my opinion, that he is someone who bottles up his emotions. This could have been a reason he murdered his family because of built-up emotions. This, of course, is no excuse, and had he communicated his frustrations to someone, this could have prevented him murdering his family.
Possible solutions. Discuss solutions that both you and your partner win. Don't have a win-lose solution. The win-lose solution, sometimes when somebody loses, you'll have hostility and you'll have resentment. Sometimes they may not show it, but they will be thinking it. Need to affirm each other. Support each other, positive evaluations, positive feelings. Always disclose your feelings, as I said. And cherish the gestures. It's a smile, a wink, a kiss, maybe just a hug, anything at all. Solutions into normal behavior. Say you're sorry. Sometimes it takes a lot to admit that just to say you're sorry, but it helps. Risk rejection by making the first move. Be willing to change, to adapt, to take a new task and responsibility. And in conclusion, I'd like to say that relationships are hard, but they're worth it in the end. And as the Swedish proverb says, a double joy is a shared joy, and a double sorrow is not a shared sorrow. Thank you.
It's crazy to watch someone in some way so accurately describe their own future. Furthermore, it makes you wonder just how much an individual creates their own reality by manifesting their conscious and subconscious thoughts into the physical world. This may sometimes be intentional or unintentional. In Chris's case, there is clear correlation with regards to what has been on his mind at some point, and then some of the occurrences that happened after. Analysing Chris's character, it is clear Chris has some intelligence, which makes the actions he took all the more puzzling. Analysing this video and the events that unfolded makes you wonder just how much people create the reality they find themselves in.